This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze, your journey through life. And my guest today, I think is really special because he plays an instrument that most of us probably don't see regularly, or we may not even know what it looks like, or even know that it exists. And I just learned a little while ago that it does exist, but in more than one form. And our guest, Sam Edelston, will tell us about that. The reason I have Sam on with us today is Sam has recorded music, and you play music regularly, I understand. And do you think most people are a little shocked when you come out, not with a guitar, but with a dulcimer to perform?
Well, hi. First of all, Karen, thank you for having me on today. Um, uh, you know, th- People aren't generally familiar with the what the mountain dulcimer, the Appalachian dulcimer. I've started calling it the fretted dulcimer for reasons that'll become clear in a little while. Um, and people tend to have very low expectations of the instrument. And so it's sort of like that old ad that ran decades ago. They laughed when I sat down at the piano, but when I started to play, I'll play, I'll play Smoke on the Water, and all of a sudden heads will start to turn because they expect some Appalachian fiddle tune.
So when you talk about Appalachian music, so many people don't really understand it. Sometimes we hear it in today's more modern form and we think, oh, that is just the coolest music we ever listened to. And yet it goes back so many years ago that it doesn't get the respect that it really deserves because, as far as I'm concerned, it's like almost the birthplace of music.
Well, uh, folk music has been around in so many forms for so many years, um, and every culture has its music. The Appalachian tunes that we know, some of them were made up by somebody in the backwoods in Kentucky, and others of them came over from England or Scotland or Germany or someplace else, you know, 1 to 300 years ago.
So, what got you into this kind of music and what got you to play the dulcimer of all instruments?
Okay, you just asked two great questions. Let me give you the 3 minute bio.
Okay.
Um, I was an unexceptional piano student starting in about fourth grade, had 5 years of piano lessons and just usual classical music and the Minuet in G and Fürelise and Mozart's Sonata in C and stuff like that. And then one day in the middle of my fifth year of lessons, I was in eighth grade. Uh, I thought of a pun. It was a stupid pun. I can remember what it was. I don't tell anybody because it was stupid enough. Uh, but I decided for some reason, you know what? I should write a song with that. And so I turned it into a song. And I went downstairs to the living room and started singing the song with my ample voice and playing it with chords in my right hand and chords in my left hand and just having a grand old time. And I continued to play that song for a few days, and then I came up with another song, and within a couple of weeks, I had about half a dozen songs, and the piano was right outside the kitchen. And so my mother suggested to me, maybe you'd like to try your father's old nylon string guitar and take it upstairs to your bedroom. And either one of my parents or my sister showed me how to tune it and how to read the Mel Bay chord diagrams. And I started picking up songs that I had heard on the radio, and we had a couple of songbooks around the house, and I kept on making up more songs. And so before long, I had a pretty prodigious repertoire of top 40 and oldies from the New York oldies station that in those days was playing everything from the 50s through the early 70s, and country, because New York had a great country station at the time too. So I was picking up all of those repertoires plus my own stuff. And I would occasionally bring my guitar into school and play during study halls or lunchtime. And one of my friends said, someday you're going to get into folk music. I promise you, folk music is the best. And I didn't believe him. And one day, a friend of mine invited me to go to a folk festival. And I started hearing all this other cool music, and there was a local record store that had lots of folk music, so I started buying more folk records also. Same friend told me about a folk coffee house a couple of years later that was in the area, and so I went to a concert at a folk coffee house in New Jersey where I was growing up. And you get exposed to the right things when you travel in the right circles.
Right.
So next thing you know, I've joined this local folk organization. It's called the Folk Project. It's centered in New Jersey, and they would have once a month an evening of music, which means that a couple dozen people or more descend on somebody's house. In this case, it was in Pottersville, New Jersey, which is a town I've never otherwise heard of. And there were a bunch of guitars around the room and maybe a fiddle or two, a couple of banjos. Somebody had a penny whistle or a recorder. Somebody had a concertina. Somebody had a mountain dulcimer in her lap, and she was playing traditional ballads on her mountain dulcimer, and it made no special impression. I did get exposed to mountain dulcimers repeatedly over the next few years in my musical development. And I really was much more focused. I was a fingerstyle by this time, a fingerstyle guitarist. I like to have a full sounding arrangement of a song, because when you're playing fingerstyle guitar, you can play the melody with the high strings, and you can play an alternating or a moving bass, and you can have a chord in between, and you can really fill out the sound. So I liked that full sound of the fingerstyle guitar. And I had no use for something with only 3 strings. And traditionally a dulcimer has only the notes of the diatonic scale, like the white keys on a piano. So you don't have the in-between notes on a traditional mountain dulcimer. And I had no use. I had no interest in it. It was like being forced to speak in full sentences where everything rhymes. It was too constrained for me. And interestingly, there's another instrument called a hammered dulcimer, which is completely unrelated. They're related the way that Taylor Swift and Jonathan Swift are related.
Got it.
They share a name and not much else. But I got hooked on the sound of the hammered dulcimer. I would go to dulcimer festivals because of that common last name. Both kinds of dulcimers would be represented. I would jam with the hammered dulcimer players. I would ignore the mountain dulcimer players. And then one day, years later, I found myself the chair of a newly starting dulcimer festival. And I decided I'd better get in touch with the other side of the family after all. You knew that this story would come someplace, right?
Right, exactly.
So I went to a dulcimer festival. I bought a mountain dulcimer. I sat down with it for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And within that time, all of a sudden, like out popped Mellow Yellow, the old Donovan song.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm thinking, okay, that's kind of cool, because not all the melody notes are at the same time as the pulse of the song. I'm just mad about saffron. And so some of my syllables are in between the claps there. And that was kind of interesting. I didn't have to play all the strings at the same time. And a few minutes later, out popped the T-Rex song Bang a Gong, which has three distinct voices in it, and all of a sudden it's like a lightning bolt. Oh my God, this thing is interesting after all. And it was my green eggs and ham moment.
Yep.
Say, I like green eggs and ham. It takes no time to tune this thing. My hammer dulcimer has 95 strings. The mountain dulcimer has 3 strings. It weighs nothing. You can carry it around easily. And I started playing more and more mountain dulcimer. Now,
Interesting.
yes.
So when you first started taking piano lessons back in the day, before your mother relegated you to your bedroom, what was music like in your family? Were your parents musicians, or was it just something that this is an education we want our kids to have because we think they should have it?
I'm not really sure why my parents bought that piano. We did not have any significant amount of music in the house when I was a child. My father used to sing on the radio when he was little. And then his mom would get home and say, Mick, get off the radio, you're going to break it. My father played a minimal amount of guitar. Once or twice a year, he would take out the guitar and gather us all around the reel-to-reel tape recorder, and we would have the Edelston Amateur Hour. And he would sing like Billy Boy or Little Brown Jug, and I would have to sing something or tell a joke, and my sister would have, everybody would have to take a turn and do something. And it was tedious. But it exposed me to the guitar.
Yeah, that's interesting because I didn't come from a musical family, but once a year my father would take out the accordion and he would play, and he was just so animated about it. My brothers and I thought that it was the silliest thing that he ever did until when he was past retirement age, he bought himself an organ, and that was his place just to stay calm. The only person who picked up on music in our family was my middle brother, and he could pick up an instrument no matter what it was, and within 5 minutes he was playing something on it. So it sounds like you sort of had that talent as well, that you heard a sound, you plucked away, and guess what? Now I have a song going.
Well, I started out playing chords, strumming chords on the guitar, and the songbooks always had chords, so I could learn the chord progression. The one useful thing out of my piano lessons, my teacher would have me play chord cadences, as she called it, which was basically chord progressions, like a C chord, an F chord, a C chord, a G chord, a G7th chord, and back to a C chord. And I didn't practice them much at all, but it gave me the mental structure so that when I came to the chords later on in guitar, it made sense.
Got it.
And
So when you were growing up, going to school, now playing in a coffee house, was your thought, I'm going to be a musician come hell or high water, and this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life?
of course not. I was going to major in math and economics in college, and or one or both of those. I eventually decided I probably sort of wanted to go into like new product development, whatever that meant, and the part of that all that did come true is that I majored in math, and I never considered going into music as a career. Partly because my father started a business when I was also in 8th grade, and after college I wound up going into that.
So, like so many musicians today, I'm finding they never truly saw their career path going that way, but it was like, you know what? It's something I like to do. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to do it on the side. And, you know, this is my happy place. And that's what it sounds like developed for you.
Hmm. Well, I'm a happy person in general. So
Okay.
I was happy at work. I was happy with music. I was happy in the other stuff I was doing in my life. Um, I'm very fortunate in that regard. That a lot of people go through like mentally difficult periods. My mentally difficult periods don't last very long at all. Nobody would notice them. Um, and the and unlike many people who get out of school, get into the working world, I never dropped music. I kept up with music throughout my adult life.
And, I think for many who have the talent and enjoy it, um, I think that's pretty important. My youngest son uh, got very involved in music when he was in fourth grade. Now, my husband and I had no idea that he was a vocalizer, had no concept. And my mother-in-law came to me one day and she said, you know, Alex just tried out for the Christmas play. And I thought, okay, well, they're fourth graders, like, they're going to sound like a bunch of fourth graders. And I said, that's great. And she said, well, you'll be surprised. And lo and behold, we were surprised. Here's a kid who just could hear it once and he could repeat it. And so we got him involved in more and more music. Um, Even though he works in the sports industry today, music is something he does on the side.
Hmm.
And that both places are his happy place, but the music tells his story. And
Hmm.
as I read some of the tunes that you have done on the dulcimer, you did Led Zeppelin. Now, who would think of Led Zeppelin on an instrument like that?
You know, my view is the Dulcimers. They were playing popular music too. But what was popular before you had cars and radios was what your kin and your neighbors played, right?
Yeah,
You weren't getting into town very often to see what's in the big theater. And so I feel that it's just natural to play the music that's around you. When somebody says play a song, the first song that occurs to me might be something that I know from the radio or something that I saw in a concert. And so I think in many ways, rock music, pop music has become the folk music of today that people orally transmit to each other.
that's interesting. I guess if I look back at the years I've lived, some of the music that we thought was just pop music at the time now has, you know, it's filled in for the generations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you also did music by a lot of famous people, but Sweet Caroline, tell me how what I mean, I only hear it one way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, that was actually funny. I was actually giving somebody a dulcimer lesson. I was giving a dulcimer lesson to a guitarist, a very fine fingerstyle guitarist, and one of the songs that's a mainstay of his guitar repertoire happened to be Sweet Caroline. So after this lesson, we just sort of sat down and traded tunes a little bit. And I had messed around a little bit with the riff of Sweet Caroline, da 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 da, that. But I had never really tried to seriously arrange the song. And then that session with my friend Glenn just turned into me ultimately coming up with an arrangement to the song. And I decided, hey, this is really good. I'm going to post it on YouTube. I posted it on YouTube a few weeks later. And that was in about January. About 5 months later, a friend of mine was in the Musical Instrument Museum in Phoenix, Arizona, which is an amazing place. And they've got hundreds or thousands, I guess they've got thousands of instruments in their collections. And they've got all sorts of displays. And you walk around and you're wearing headphones that they give you when you walk into the museum. And automatically, when you approach an exhibit, there's a video loop that's playing and you hear the video loop. And my friend is walking through the museum and there's a Dulcimer exhibit. And all of a sudden he hears Sweet Caroline and he looks up at the screen and there's me playing because they had my video of Sweet
Yeah,
Caroline in the video loop.
I love that. So you got surprised.
So there is nothing more wonderful than to hear that your tune has been picked up in such an esteemed setting.
Absolutely.
And yeah,
So
and yeah,
so
and go
where
ahead.
do you play local? Do you just play locally? Do you go around the country? Tell us
So
how we can find your music.
okay, well, so I perform in person, largely at Dulcimer festivals, but also at folk venues. That I've had some rock gigs. I'd like to break into more rock gigs. It's funny, my in-person gigs tend to be distant, uh, 2 or 3 hours from here, or airplane gigs that I have to fly to or do long drives. I've got a couple coming up in Virginia and North Carolina, nice drives from here in Connecticut. I've got a couple coming up in Maine that I haven't announced yet on my website. Um, I've got I've got actually one coming up in Ohio this fall that also isn't up on my website, but it's going to be in the Cincinnati area.
Okay.
Um, so I travel for these gigs, and then I also perform online. And so I actually will be performing. My first concert of the year is at a website and Facebook site called Giving Gigs, GIVINGGIGS, on Facebook, and they've got some sort of link so that it'll be viewable off of Facebook. Also, if you go to my website, then you can actually. I will put the link there when I get the link in the next couple of days, but that's going to
Okay.
be a week from Friday, January 3rd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I've got a whole hour, and that means I have lots of time to do interesting stuff.
That is fantastic. And this past year, you put together a new release. So tell us a little bit about Making Waves.
Okay, Making Waves is the title of this album. It is a unique album of fretted dulcimer. Notice I'm saying fretted dulcimer. I've sort of taken it down out from the mountains. I'm not the only person who plays popular music on it, but I'm the most vociferous about it. Um, and uh, and so this is an album of mostly classic rock and classic pop songs, and played with the fretted dulcimer fronting a rock band. Um, every song has drums or percussion. Uh, Most of the songs have an electric bass. We've got a couple of other instruments selectively. Half of the songs have vocals. Um, and it's just an amazing album. It is my personal favorite album of all time, any artist, any genre, because I consider it groundbreaking.
I love that. So
You know,
you're still in the New York area, correct?
I'm in Connecticut, Southwest Connecticut.
Okay. So you talked about playing in a coffee house in New Jersey. So have you ever played at the oldest coffee house in your area in Saratoga Springs, New York?
You're talking about Cafe Lena.
Yes, I am.
I have never had the pleasure of getting up there yet. I really should reach out to them.
Well, I'm going to make sure that they hear this interview. I have a few connections. I don't know if I can get you in there, but I'm surely going to uh, make some connections because
Oh,
this is
that
the type of music that um, Cafe Lena basically started with. Um, and they have grown quite a bit and they've made some changes. But for those of you listening, if you don't know, Bob Dylan actually got his start at Cafe Lena because Lena, who is the owner, um, sat him down and told him what to do with his music, and he went for it. Lena had a wonderful ear for music, and
mm,
if she didn't like a performer, she let them know it. But if she liked somebody or saw that they had possibilities, she was there to encourage them. Um, and that's not too far from you.
that's beautiful. That's only a couple hours. That's easy.
That's an easy ride,
That
right?
that would be a fun gig.
Well, in Cafe Lena, I think they hold like 100 to 120 people in their um, cafe. And for those of you who can't get there, all their shows are on YouTube. So you can watch them live or you can stream them. So if we can get Sam out there, we'll be able to actually watch him live or continue to stream him. Is there any one song on this new album that you really want us to listen for?
Oh God, this is like which of my children will I leave out of the lifeboat?
Yeah.
Um, there are probably about 3 or 4 songs that have been getting the most raves, but I mean every song to me makes a unique statement. She's Always a Woman, the Billy Joel song.
Yep.
I have this sweet instrumental arrangement that people think is 2 dulcimers, and it's really only one. But I'm using the flat pick in very intricate ways, and so you hear multiple voices. Call Me is another track, the Blondie song, and I do something, I'm not going to say what, that ups the voltage between the first and second verses. And it's like every time I listen to it, I just can't help but fist pumping in the air. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is a real, I call it a Clark Kent and Superman arrangement, because the verses are very gentle and ethereal and chorusy and reverby. And then the choruses just totally rock. And for that one, instead of a regular drummer, I wanted to do things that a drummer couldn't do. I brought in a professional beatboxer for the percussion on that. And I said, for the end of the song, put Lucy way the heck up in the sky. Use your imagination. And oh my God, Chesney Snows, the beatboxer, he totally transformed what was already a great arrangement. And I've got to just give credit also. You and Me on the Rock is a Brandi Carlile song that was nominated at the Grammys in 2022 for Record of the Year. It did not win, but if it hadn't been for Just Like That by Bonnie Raitt, I'm pretty sure it would have. And You and Me on the Rock was actually written by Brandi Carlile and 2 of her bandmates on a dulcimer.
Wow. Okay.
They recorded it with a guitar, but they wrote it on a dulcimer. And I felt it should be brought back to the dulcimer. And I shared the vocals on this with one of my kids, who is just a magnificent Berkeley School of Music educated musician. And we made a total freaking musical party out of it. You can play drop the needle on it like every 35, 40, 50, 60 seconds. Every time you drop the needle, it sounds different. It's a kaleidoscope.
I love that.
And so those are just a few of my favorite things.
Well, you sure have given us, a great gift here for the holidays, because it's music that so many of us might not have gone to listen to. And that's what I love about doing these podcasts, because I meet individuals like yourself, and maybe I've listened to your music, maybe I haven't. And it's like, okay, well, I better go figure it out. The first time I did an entertainment podcast, a friend of mine who I grew up with, her son is in a very hard rock band, to the point that I had no desire to listen to his music. But he offered to come on my show, and I thought, well, I better listen. I listened before I talked to him, and I still, this isn't my cup of tea. But after I interviewed him, I went back and listened, and I heard it differently. And it was like, why did I hear it differently? And I realized it was because I was more open to it. At first, I wasn't because I just had this, I'm not going to like this kind of music. So I'll listen, but I'm not going to enjoy it. But I enjoyed my conversation with him so much that now I listen to his music. So I want my listeners to know that maybe this isn't what you'd be thinking of listening to over the holidays. But you know what? We all have some time. So I will have some links in there for Sam's music. Please go ahead and follow him. And if you have a gig, hire him. Let him travel the United States and share his music with you.
And if I can say also, my last name is impossible to spell, but my website is easy. And so my website is samthemusicman.com.
How easy. Well, your last name shouldn't be that hard. It's Edelston, right?
Right. And it's similar to a lot of other variants.
Okay,
And so 5% of the people get it right the first time.
got it. Well, I'm glad I got it right because I usually don't. So,
Mhm.
well, I want to thank you for joining us. All your information will be in the show notes. And I am going to make that contact for you and I will copy you on it as well. Okay.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day and a happy holiday.
Okay, you too, and happy holidays. And it's been a pleasure.
Very good. Thank you.